Hey everyone, welcome to Dr. Sleep. We love creating unique content for you, but we need your support now more than ever. Our channel is facing some challenges, and we really need your interaction. If you enjoy what we offer, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share our videos with your friends. Every comment, like, and share makes a huge difference. Let's grow together and keep bringing you the content you care about. Thank you for your continued support. The mountain valley was breathtaking. Enclosed by jagged peaks and towering pines, it felt like stepping into another world, one far removed from cell service, traffic, and the chaos of daily life. Sam dropped his heavy pack onto the soft grass and let out a long breath. The air was cool and carried the scent of pine and damp earth, the perfect escape from their bustling routines. "This is unreal," Olivia said, taking a slow spin to take it all in. Her auburn hair glinted in the afternoon sun as she surveyed the peaceful expanse. "How did you even find this place?" "Years of research," Leo replied with a smirk, adjusting the straps of his pack. "And by research, I mean I got lost hiking a few summers back. Best wrong turn I've ever made." Jessie groaned as she collapsed onto a nearby rock, pulling off her boots with a dramatic sigh. "My feet are never forgiving me for this," she said. "Why do you always drag us to the middle of nowhere?" "Because it's worth it," Ben chimed in, already busy unpacking a portable grill. "Trust me, once you've had my campfire burgers, your feet will be the last thing on your mind." Sam chuckled, shaking his head as he helped set up the tents. The group's dynamic always followed this rhythm: Jessie's playful complaints, Leo's enthusiasm, Ben's endless appetite, and Olivia's awe of nature. It was a comforting routine, one that felt like home even in the most unfamiliar places. By the time the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, the group had a roaring fire going. They sat around it, passing around foil-wrapped food and trading stories. Leo started with one of his usual ghost tales, a hitchhiker who vanished after being picked up on a nearby highway. Jessie rolled her eyes, clearly unimpressed, but Olivia leaned in, hanging on every word. "Stop trying to scare us," Jessie said, tossing a marshmallow at him. "Scared?" Leo teased. "It's just a story." As the firelight flickered, Sam thought he heard something faint, like laughter carried on the wind. He glanced toward the darkened tree line, but there was nothing there. Probably just the distant sounds of the forest, he thought. As the group crawled into their tents for the night, Sam lay awake, staring at the thin fabric above him. The laughter was faint now, almost imperceptible, but it stayed with him as he drifted off. It was the kind of sound that clung to the back of your mind, waiting to resurface. Sam awoke early to an eerie stillness. The valley, so alive with the sounds of nature the day before, was now deathly silent. No birds chirped. No breeze rustled the leaves. It was as if the world had been muted. He sat up in his sleeping bag, rubbing his eyes, and noticed a faint dampness in the air. Something was off. Pushing open the tent flap, he froze. A dense, swirling fog had enveloped the campsite. It wasn't the kind of mist he'd seen on early morning hikes. This fog was unnaturally thick, a pale, shifting wall that seemed almost alive. It moved in slow, deliberate tendrils, curling around the trees and creeping toward the tents. "What the hell?" Sam muttered to himself. He stepped outside, shivering as the cool dampness wrapped around him. The air felt heavier, oppressive, as though the fog carried a weight of its own. Ben emerged from his tent a moment later, stretching and yawning. "Whoa, where'd this come from?" he asked, staring at the fog with a mixture of curiosity and unease. "This wasn't in the forecast." "Fog's normal in valleys, right?" Jessie said as she joined them, though her voice was uncertain. She hugged her arms around herself, glancing warily at the pale gray expanse. "But it's so quiet." Sam nodded, noticing it too. The silence was unnatural, like the fog had swallowed every sound. He scanned the campsite. The fire pit was barely visible through the haze, and the distant trees seemed to vanish entirely, as though the forest had been erased. "Weird," Olivia said softly as she stepped out, her eyes wide as she took in the sight. She walked toward the edge of the camp where the fog seemed thickest. It's moving. Sam followed her gaze and saw what she meant. The fog shifted unnaturally, curling and twisting as though it had a mind of its own. It didn't drift with the wind, it slithered, wrapping around trees and creeping closer to the camp. "We should wait it out," Leo suggested, his usual bravado faltering. "It'll burn off once the sun gets higher." But Sam wasn't so sure. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The fog wasn't just moving, it was approaching. His unease deepened as he noticed how the tendrils seemed to recoil slightly when they neared the fire pit, only to press forward again moments later. Then the sounds began. Soft, distant footsteps echoed from somewhere in the fog. At first they were faint, barely perceptible, but they grew louder with each passing moment. Sam's heart began to race. "Did you hear that?" Jessie whispered, her voice trembling. None of them answered, but from the looks on their faces, Sam knew they had. The footsteps continued, echoing faintly through the fog, bouncing off unseen surfaces. Sam strained his ears, trying to pinpoint the source, but the sounds seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It felt as though the fog was toying with them, distorting the echoes to confuse and disorient. "Maybe it's just animals," Leo suggested, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. He gripped a sturdy branch, holding it like a makeshift weapon. Or maybe another hiker passing through. Olivia shook her head slowly, her eyes wide as she peered into the shifting mist. "No animal moves like that. It's too deliberate." The laughter came next, a faint, distorted chuckle that floated on the still air. It was close, but faded as quickly as it came, leaving behind a chilling silence. Jessie grabbed Sam's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "That wasn't one of you, was it?" "No," Sam whispered, his eyes fixed on the fog. Shadows flitted at the edges of his vision, too quick, too vague to make out clearly. It was as if figures were moving just beyond the veil, watching, waiting. Ben stood, his jaw clenched. "We should check it out. If someone's out there, we need to know." "Are you nuts?" Jessie hissed. "What if it's—" She didn't finish, but the fear in her voice spoke volumes. They all felt it, that creeping dread that something was very, very wrong. Sam weighed their options. Staying put felt safer, but the idea of sitting in this thickening fog, waiting for whatever lurked within, was unbearable. "Okay," he said finally, trying to keep his voice steady. "Ben and I will take a look. Stay close to the fire." The two men ventured into the fog, flashlights cutting weak beams through the thick mist. Each step felt heavier than the last, the silence pressing in on them like a physical force. The footsteps had stopped, but the laughter lingered, echoing softly, teasingly. "See anything?" Ben whispered, his voice tight. "No," Sam replied, his eyes darting left and right. The fog distorted everything, twisting shadows into monstrous shapes. Then he saw it, a figure just ahead, standing motionless among the trees. "Over there," he whispered. They approached cautiously, but as they drew near, the figure dissolved into the mist. Ben cursed under his breath. "I don't like this, man. Let's get back." They turned to retrace their steps, but found the path obscured. The fog had thickened behind them, swallowing up their footprints. Panic flared in Sam's chest. They hadn't gone far, had they? From the fog behind them, the footsteps started again. This time they were closer. Sam's breath quickened as the footsteps closed in behind them. He spun around, aiming his flashlight into the fog, but the beam barely pierced the gray veil. The sound stopped abruptly, replaced by a suffocating silence that made his pulse pound in his ears. "Ben," Sam whispered, his voice tight. "We need to move, now." Ben nodded, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. "Yeah, let's get back to camp." They turned, only to realize the fog had thickened further, erasing any trace of the path they'd taken. The trees around them loomed like dark skeletal figures, and every direction looked the same. Sam's sense of direction, usually sharp, felt muddled, like the fog was twisting his thoughts as much as the landscape. "Wasn't the camp this way?" Ben asked, pointing into the void. Sam hesitated. It felt right, but his gut churned with doubt. "I don't know anymore. This fog, it's messing with everything." A rustling sound came from their left. Both men froze, turning their flashlights toward the noise. The beam caught movement, just for a split second. Something darted between the trees, too fast to be human. "Did you see that?" Ben hissed. "Yeah," Sam whispered, his grip tightening on the flashlight. "Keep moving. Stick close to me." They pressed forward, their steps quick and unsteady. The fog seemed to close in tighter, the oppressive silence broken only by their ragged breathing. Then, from somewhere ahead, they heard it. Laughter. Low, distorted, and echoing. It wasn't friendly. It sounded mocking, as though whatever was out there was enjoying their fear. Sam stopped, grabbing Ben's arm. "Wait! Don't move!" "What?" Ben whispered, his voice rising with panic. Sam pointed ahead. Through the fog, a figure stood motionless, its shape blurred and indistinct. It was taller than any person should be, its limbs unnaturally long. It didn't move, but Sam could feel its attention locked on them. Ben took a shaky step back. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," Sam said. "But don't run. Just back away." Before he could finish, the figure vanished, dissolving into the fog like smoke. A sudden rush of movement followed, a blur of shadow and sound. Ben screamed as he was yanked backward into the mist, his flashlight tumbling to the ground. "Ben!" Sam shouted, lunging toward him. But it was too late. The fog swallowed him whole, leaving only the faint echoes of his scream. Sam stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest. He scanned the fog with his flashlight, but there was nothing. No sign of Ben, no sound, only the swirling gray. "Ben," he shouted again, his voice breaking, but the fog offered no answer. Only silence. Sam stumbled back toward the camp, his legs trembling as he forced himself to move. The fog seemed heavier now, pressing against him like a living thing, whispering thoughts of dread and failure into his mind. Every few steps, he turned his flashlight behind him, hoping, praying, that Ben would emerge from the mist. But the path to camp was unrecognizable. The familiar landmarks were gone, replaced by looming trees that seemed to shift and twist when he wasn't looking. His breath came in short, shallow bursts as the realization set in. The fog wasn't just disorienting him. It was alive, shifting the forest around him. "Stay calm," he muttered to himself. "You just need to get back. Find the others." Then faintly he heard it. Footsteps behind him. They were slow and deliberate, crunching leaves with a measured rhythm. Sam froze, clutching his flashlight tightly. "Ben?" he called, his voice shaking. No response. He turned, aiming the flashlight into the swirling gray. For a moment there was nothing but mist and shadow. Then, out of the void, a figure emerged. "Sam," Ben's voice called softly. His friend stepped forward, his familiar frame visible in the dim light. He looked disheveled, his clothes were torn and his face was pale, but it was undeniably Ben. Relief flooded Sam's chest. "Ben, thank God, I thought—" He stopped mid-sentence, something in his gut twisting. Ben's smile was too wide, stretching unnaturally across his face. His eyes shimmered in the foggy light, reflective like an animal's. He cocked his head slightly, his movements unnervingly jerky. "What's wrong?" Ben asked, his tone off, too calm, too sweet. "It's me." Sam took a step back, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Where did you go? What happened out there?" Ben's smile faltered, his expression briefly going blank. "I got lost, but I'm fine now. Let's go back to camp." Sam didn't move. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from Ben's face. The longer he looked, the more wrong it seemed. His skin was too smooth, his features too perfect, like someone had sculpted him from memory. "Why aren't you saying anything, Sam?" Ben's voice grew colder, his smile returning. "It's me. Don't you trust me?" Sam's grip tightened on his flashlight. He shook his head slowly. "You're not Ben." The thing wearing Ben's face tilted its head again, its grin widening. "That's a shame," it said softly. "I really thought you'd believe me." Before Sam could react, it lunged. He stumbled backward, barely keeping his footing as the figure melted back into the fog, its laughter echoing in the distance. Sam turned and ran, his heart pounding. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't his friend. Sam burst into the clearing of the campsite, gasping for air, his pulse racing. Jesse, Olivia, and Leo turned toward him, their faces pale and anxious. The fire crackled weakly in the center, its light barely keeping the encroaching fog at bay. "Sam!" Jesse cried, running toward him. "Where's Ben? What happened?" He's gone," Sam stammered, his voice hoarse. He grabbed Jesse by the shoulders, his eyes wild. "Listen to me. That fog, it's alive. It's doing something to us. It took him, and when I saw him again..." He trailed off, unable to find the words to describe the thing that had looked like his friend. "What are you talking about?" Leo asked, his brows furrowed. "Ben's gone. Did you leave him out there?" "No, I didn't leave him," Sam snapped, his voice rising. "It wasn't Ben anymore. Something's out there, and it's wearing his face." Jessie's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Olivia, usually the calmest of them, began pacing near the fire, wringing her hands. "This can't be happening," she muttered under her breath. "It doesn't make sense." "Stop," Leo said, his tone sharp. "We're all panicking, and that's exactly what's making this worse. Fog doesn't take people. Maybe Ben got lost, and you're just freaking out." Sam glared at him. "Do you think I imagined what I saw? You didn't hear his voice or see the way he smiled. It wasn't him, Leo." "Enough," Olivia snapped, her voice cracking as she stopped pacing. "All this arguing isn't helping. We need to stay together. If we split up, we're screwed." The group fell into an uneasy silence. The fire popped and hissed, its embers glowing faintly as if struggling to stay alive. The fog swirled at the edges of the clearing, tendrils creeping closer inch by inch. Every so often Sam thought he saw shadows moving within it, fleeting and impossible to follow. Then came the sound of footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, crunching leaves just beyond the firelight. Everyone froze, their eyes darting toward the sound. A figure stepped into view, emerging from the fog. It was Ben. "Hey guys," he said casually, brushing off his jacket like nothing had happened. "What's with all the drama?" Jesse gasped, taking a step back. Olivia grabbed a stick from the fire, holding it like a weapon. Sam stared, his breath caught in his throat. "That's not him," Sam whispered, barely audible. "Of course it's me," Ben said, his grin widening. "Don't I look familiar?" His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, a strange layered distortion that sent chills down Sam's spine. Leo stepped forward hesitantly. "Ben, are you okay?" Ben's head tilted slightly, his too wide smile frozen in place. "Never better. You should come closer." "Don't go near him," Sam said, his voice firm but shaking. He stepped in front of Jesse and Olivia, holding out an arm to block their path. The stick in Olivia's hand trembled as the firelight flickered against the encroaching fog. "Why are you acting so weird?" Ben asked, his grin unwavering. His voice carried that same layered distortion, a faint echo beneath his words that seemed to twist in the air. "It's me. Don't you trust me?" "Stay back," Olivia snapped, thrusting the burning stick toward him. The flames cast jagged shadows across Ben's face, illuminating his too smooth skin and reflective eyes. Ben cocked his head, his movements unnaturally fluid, almost serpentine. "You don't look so good, Olivia," he said, his grin widening. "Maybe you need a walk. The fog's nice tonight." "Shut up," Jessie yelled, her voice breaking. "You're not Ben." The figure didn't flinch. It stepped closer, its footsteps heavy yet silent at the same time. "I am Ben," it insisted, though its face twitched unnaturally, like it was struggling to maintain its shape. "I've always been Ben." Leo stepped forward, his expression torn between disbelief and fear. "This is insane," he muttered. "Ben, if that's really you, just prove it. Tell me something only you would know." For the first time, Ben's grin faltered. His face slackened, and he stared at Leo, unblinking. The silence stretched, oppressive and thick. Then he spoke. "Why would I need to prove anything?" he asked softly, his voice like a low hum vibrating through the clearing. "You should already know." Sam tightened his grip on the flashlight. "That's not him, Leo. Back away." But Leo didn't listen. He took another step forward, his hands trembling. "Ben, I need you to..." The thing moved faster than any of them could react. In an instant, it was on Leo, grabbing him by the shoulders and yanking him into the fog. His scream was cut short as the mist swallowed them both, leaving only the faint sound of laughter behind. "Leo!" Jessie screamed, running toward the edge of the clearing, but Sam grabbed her before she could follow. "Let me go! We have to help him!" "It's too late!" Sam shouted, pulling her back. "If you go out there, it'll take you too!" Jessie sobbed, collapsing to her knees as Olivia stood frozen, her face pale. The fog crept closer now, tendrils curling around the edge of the firelight. A moment later, Leo returned, or something that looked like him. He stepped into the clearing, his face blank and his eyes too shiny, reflecting the dim firelight. His voice was soft, calm, and wrong. "Why are you crying?" he asked Jessie. "I'm fine now. We're all fine in the fog." Jessie's sobs turned into horrified gasps as she clutched Sam's arm. Olivia, still gripping the burning stick, took a step back, her legs trembling. The fog loomed behind Leo, alive and watching, waiting for its next move. Sam's grip on Jessie's arm tightened as the thing wearing Leo's face stepped closer. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring their terror. Its features were disturbingly perfect, yet lifeless, like a mask made to fool them. "Stay back," Olivia said, her voice shaking as she waved the burning stick toward Leo. The flames cast flickering shadows on his face, but he didn't even flinch. He stopped just short of the firelight, his grin widening unnaturally. "Why are you so afraid?" Leo asked, his voice layered with that same haunting distortion. "We're all friends, aren't we? The fog just helps you see things differently." Jessie whimpered, burying her face in Sam's shoulder. Sam's mind raced as he tried to think of a way out. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but where? The fog surrounded them, twisting the landscape into an unfamiliar labyrinth. "We're leaving," Sam said, his voice firm despite the panic clawing at his chest. "Jessie, Olivia, grab what you can, now." "Leave?" Leo repeated, his head tilting sharply to the side. His grin faded, replaced by a hollow, lifeless expression. "You can't leave. The fog won't let you." Sam ignored him, dragging Jessie toward the closest tent. Olivia followed, clutching the stick tightly. "We can't stay here," Sam said as he stuffed a flashlight and a few supplies into his pack. "If we do, we're next." "Where do we go?" Olivia asked, her voice frantic. "The fog's everywhere." "We follow the firelight," Sam said, glancing at the smoldering embers. "It doesn't like the fire. As long as we stay close to something burning, maybe it'll keep us safe." Jessie wiped her tears, nodding shakily. "Let's just go, please." They turned to leave the camp, but Leo was suddenly in their path, his eyes glinting in the dim light. "You can't leave," he said, his voice cold and flat. "You belong to the fog now." Sam didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, swinging a burning branch he'd grabbed from the fire pit. The flames caught Leo's shirt, and for the first time the thing recoiled. Its face twisted in a grotesque snarl, the perfect features melting into something inhuman. It let out a low, guttural shriek and staggered back into the fog. "Go!" Sam shouted, shoving Jessie and Olivia forward. They ran, their flashlights barely cutting through the dense mist. The fog moved with them, coiling and writhing, almost alive. Behind them, the distorted laughter returned, echoing and growing louder. Sam's chest burned as he pushed forward, gripping Jessie's hand tightly. He didn't know where they were going, only that they couldn't stop. Not if they wanted to survive. Sam, Jessie, and Olivia pushed through the relentless fog, the cold mist clinging to their skin and clothes like damp fingers. Every step felt heavier, the forest floor seeming to pull at their feet. The laughter behind them had faded, but now there was a new sound, soft, wet, slithering, like something crawling through the fog just out of sight. "Don't look back," Sam said, his voice hoarse. He glanced at Olivia, who clutched her burning stick like a lifeline. Jessie clung to his arm, her breathing shallow and fast. "I can't do this anymore," Jessie whimpered. "I can't. It's too much." "You have to," Sam snapped, more harshly than he intended. He softened his tone. "If you stop, it'll take you. We're almost out, I promise." Olivia stumbled, catching herself on a tree trunk. "Are we?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Do you even know where we are? We've been running in circles for hours." Sam wanted to argue, to reassure her, but the truth gnawed at him. The fog was playing with them, twisting the landscape and making sure they never found a way out. Still, stopping wasn't an option. The firelight in Olivia's hand flickered dangerously low, and Sam knew their fragile protection wouldn't last much longer. Ahead, the forest seemed to shift. The trees grew closer together, their gnarled branches intertwining to form an almost impenetrable barrier. The only path forward was a narrow gap between two massive trunks, the fog thicker on the other side. "Through there," Sam said, pointing. His voice wavered as he said it. The gap felt like a trap, but they had no choice. Behind them, the slithering grew louder, accompanied by faint echoing whispers. Jessie hesitated, pulling back. "What if it's worse on the other side?" "It's worse here," Sam said, dragging her forward. "Just trust me." They slipped through the narrow gap, the cold bark of the trees pressing against their arms. On the other side, the fog seemed to shift again, the air growing heavier, more suffocating. Sam's flashlight flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw something move ahead, a tall humanoid shape watching them. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice trembling. The slithering stopped abruptly, replaced by silence so deep it made Sam's ears ring. Jessie opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a shadow lunged from the fog, grabbing her arm. She screamed, and Sam turned just in time to see it. A figure with no face, its head smooth and featureless, its body shifting and flowing like liquid. Its grip on Jessie tightened as it began to drag her back into the mist. "Sam!" she cried, her voice shrill with terror. "Help me!" Sam lunged forward, grabbing her other arm. "I've got you. Hold on." Olivia swung her burning stick, the flames catching the creature's arm. It shrieked, an unearthly sound that vibrated in their bones, and released Jessie, retreating into the fog. They didn't wait to see if it would return. Sam grabbed Jessie and they ran again, the mist swallowing everything behind them. The forest seemed endless, the fog never relenting. Sam, Jessie, and Olivia pushed forward, their legs burning and lungs heaving with every desperate step. The sound of their own ragged breaths was the only thing keeping them grounded as the mist around them twisted and pulsed, alive and aware. Olivia's burning stick was nearly extinguished, the embers barely glowing in the oppressive dampness. "It's not going to let us go," she said, her voice breaking. "We're never getting out of here." "Yes, we are," Sam snapped, his tone hard. He didn't believe it himself, but he couldn't afford to let them give up. Jessie was barely keeping up, her steps faltering. He tightened his grip on her arm. "We just have to keep going." Through the fog, a faint glimmer of light appeared. Sam's heart leapt. It wasn't like the firelight or the distorted glow of their flashlights. This was brighter, steady, and clear. "Do you see that?" he asked, his voice shaking with hope. "There's something ahead." Jessie squinted, her face pale and streaked with tears. "What is it? Is it the way out?" "It has to be," Sam said, though doubt gnawed at him. The light didn't belong in this twisted, fog-filled nightmare, but it was the only direction they had. They stumbled toward it, the fog thinning slightly as the light grew brighter. The outline of a dirt road came into view, and Sam let out a shaky laugh. "We made it," he said, almost disbelieving. "It's the road." A vehicle's engine rumbled in the distance. Moments later, headlights pierced the fog, illuminating their disheveled forms. A truck rolled to a stop in front of them, and a man in a park ranger's uniform leaned out of the window. His face was weathered but kind, his sharp eyes surveying the group. "What the hell happened to you kids?" he asked. "Please," Sam begged, his voice cracking, "get us out of here." The ranger nodded, opening the door. "Climb in." They piled into the truck, the warmth of the cab almost overwhelming after the cold grip of the fog. Jessie collapsed into the back seat, sobbing quietly, while Olivia stared out the window, her face blank with exhaustion. Sam sat in the passenger seat, his body tense. "Where did you come from?" the ranger asked, shifting the truck into gear. Sam hesitated. "The valley," he said finally. "There's something in the fog. It's alive. It took our friends." The ranger's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "The valley, huh?" His tone was calm, but there was something beneath it, something cold. Sam turned to look at him. The ranger's face was calm, but his smile was too wide, his teeth too perfect. His voice carried that same faint distortion, that layered echo. "You're safe now," the ranger said softly. His grin stretched wider, too wide. "The fog doesn't follow you here." Sam's stomach dropped as he realized the truth. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, where Jesse and Olivia sat silently, too still, their faces blank, their eyes reflecting the same unnatural gleam as the ranger's. The laughter began again, low and mocking, as the fog crept closer to the truck. A few months ago, I was down one of those infamous internet rabbit holes. You know the kind. 1 minute you're watching cute cat videos, the next you're watching a 10-part documentary on the most obscure conspiracy theories out there. It was late, I was bored, and I ended up in the darker corners of the web, a place I had always been curious about but too cautious to explore deeply. I stumbled upon a forum that claimed to have leaked documents from Area 51. Yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous, but curiosity got the better of me, and I started reading. The threads were full of people arguing about the legitimacy of the documents, with some swearing they were real while others called out obvious photoshopped images. But then, I found a post from a guy named Unseen Truth that caught my attention. Unseen Truth claimed to have worked at Area 51 and had proof of the government's interactions with extraterrestrial beings. It was the kind of thing you'd laugh off if it weren't for the detail he provided. He described secret hangars, underground labs, and even meetings between high-ranking officials and alien representatives. His post was filled with technical jargon and insider terminology that seemed too complex to be fabricated by some random internet troll. He had attached several documents to his post, redacted reports, schematics of what he claimed were alien vehicles, and even a supposed blueprint for a UFO. Skeptical but intrigued, I downloaded the files. The schematics were incredibly detailed, far beyond my understanding, but they looked legitimate. The blueprint for the UFO was the most fascinating. It detailed the materials, the energy source, even the propulsion system, which was way beyond anything I'd ever heard of. But the real kicker was a video file. Unseen Truth claimed it was footage of a landing zone within Area 51 where aliens could come and go as they pleased, making deals with the government. I hesitated before clicking play, my heart pounding in my chest. The video quality was grainy, and the timestamp suggested it was from the late 90s. In it, you could see a circular area surrounded by high fences and armed guards. Then, a bright light appeared in the sky, growing larger until it resolved into a classic saucer-shaped UFO. It descended slowly, landing on the marked pad. The video cut off abruptly after that, leaving me with more questions than answers. I know how all this sounds. Trust me, if someone else was telling me this story, I'd think they were nuts. But there was something about the way Unseen Truth wrote and the evidence he provided that felt real. He mentioned that the aliens were not only cooperating with the government, but were also involved in developing advanced weapons and vehicles. According to him, they had been doing this for decades, under the guise of top-secret military projects. I spent hours poring over the documents, my mind racing with possibilities. What if it was all true? What if the government really was hiding something this big? The more I read, the more paranoid I became. I started noticing odd things. Strange cars parked near my house, unusual clicks on my phone line. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild, but it felt like someone was watching me. I decided to message Unseen Truth directly, thanking him for sharing the information and asking if he had any more proof. It took a few days, but he finally replied. His message was short and cryptic. "Be careful. They know who you are now. Trust no one." That's when I realized I might be in over my head. I had uncovered something that was never meant to see the light of day, and now I was part of the conspiracy. Whether it's true or not, I can't say for certain. But the fear I felt was real, and it hasn't left me since. So, there it is. I know it sounds crazy, and maybe it is. but something in those documents and that video felt genuine. If any of you have any thoughts or advice, I'm all ears. Because right now, I don't know what to believe, and that's the scariest part of all. Hey guys, it's me again. Thanks for all the support and advice after my first post. I didn't expect such a big response, and it's good to know I'm not alone in this. So, as promised, here's what happened next. After getting that cryptic message from Unseen Truth, I felt a mix of dread and excitement. The paranoia was getting to me. I started double-checking the locks on my doors, keeping the blinds closed, and even avoiding my usual routes to work. I knew I was probably overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One night, about a week after my initial dive into the dark web, I was scrolling through the news, trying to distract myself, when I noticed something odd. There was a small, easily overlooked article about a fire at a research facility near Area 51. The article was vague, saying only that the fire was quickly contained and that no one was injured. But what caught my eye was a photo accompanying the article. Barely visible in the background, there was a symbol that matched one of the logos on the documents Unseen Truth had shared. It was a small detail, but it felt significant. I couldn't help but think the fire was a cover-up for something bigger. Maybe someone was trying to destroy evidence. I saved the article and decided to dig deeper into the facility. The next few days were a blur of research. I spent every free moment looking into the facility and any connections it might have with Area 51. What I found was both fascinating and terrifying. The facility was officially a weather research station, but several sources hinted at classified projects and government contracts. There were whispers of strange experiments and sightings of unmarked black helicopters in the area. I tried reaching out to Unseen Truth again, hoping he could provide more context. Days went by with no response, and I started to worry. What if something had happened to him? Then, late one night, I received another message from him. It was brief and to the point. Meet me. Tomorrow, midnight. Coordinates attached. My heart raced as I looked up the coordinates. They pointed to a remote location in the Nevada desert, not far from Area 51. I knew it was risky, but I had to go. I needed answers, and this might be my only chance. The next night I drove out to the meeting spot, my mind racing with possibilities. The desert was eerily quiet, the only sounds the crunch of gravel under my tires and the distant call of coyotes. I arrived at the coordinates just before midnight, parking my car behind a cluster of rocks. I waited, the silence pressing in on me. Minutes felt like hours, but finally I saw headlights approaching. A beat-up old truck pulled up beside me, and a man stepped out. He looked exactly how I imagined, disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy about him. He introduced himself as Unseen Truth, though he never gave me his real name. We talked for hours, and he revealed even more than I expected. According to him, the fire at the research facility was indeed a cover-up. He claimed they had been experimenting with alien technology, and something had gone wrong. The government had swooped in to contain the situation and destroy any evidence. He told me about the deals the government had made with extraterrestrials, trading technology for resources and information. He said the aliens had been visiting Earth for centuries, but only in recent decades had they established formal contact. They were interested in our planet's resources and our genetic material, though he didn't go into much detail about what that meant. The most chilling part of our conversation was when he mentioned the weapons. He said the government was developing advanced weapons using alien tech, things far beyond our current capabilities. He warned me that these weapons could change the balance of power in the world, and that there were factions within the government willing to use them, no matter the cost. I asked him why he was telling me all this, why he had risked so much to leak the documents. He looked at me, a haunted look in his eyes, and said, "People need to know the truth. We can't let them keep this secret any longer. The world deserves to know what's really going on." We parted ways as dawn broke, and I drove home in a daze, my mind buzzing with everything he had told me. I knew I had to share this, but I also knew the risks. I was now part of something much bigger than myself, and there was no turning back. So here I am, sharing this with all of you. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I know that something is going on, something that goes far beyond what we've been told. If anyone has any more information or advice, please let me know. This isn't just my story anymore. It's all of ours. Hey again, everyone. Thanks for sticking with me through this crazy journey. After my meeting with Unseen Truth, things started to get even weirder. I hope you're ready for what comes next, because it only gets stranger from here. After our conversation, I spent the next few days trying to process everything. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I went outside, I felt eyes on me. I started noticing the same car parked on my street, the same people passing by my house. Paranoia was setting in hard, and I knew I had to be careful. One evening, while I was reviewing the documents again, my computer screen suddenly went black. At first, I thought it was just a glitch, but then a line of text appeared. "You've been warned." My heart pounded in my chest. Someone had hacked into my computer. I quickly unplugged it and sat there in the dark, trying to calm my racing thoughts. The next day, I decided to take a break and clear my head. I went for a walk in a nearby park, trying to shake off the paranoia. As I was walking, I noticed a man following me at a distance. He was dressed in plain clothes, but there was something about him that screamed government agent. I quickened my pace, and so did he. My heart raced as I ducked into a coffee shop, hoping to lose him in the crowd. I watched from the window as he stopped outside, scanning the area. After a few tense minutes, he moved on, and I finally breathed a sigh of relief. But I knew this wasn't over. They were onto me, and I needed to be more careful than ever. When I got home, I found a plain envelope on my doorstep. No return address, just my name typed on the front. I brought it inside and carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message: "Stop digging, or there will be consequences." No signature, no clue who had sent it. But the message was clear. They wanted me to stop. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head, wondering if I had gone too far. But then I remembered Unseen Truth's words. People need to know the truth. I knew I couldn't back down now. I decided to reach out to a journalist friend of mine. I figured if anyone could help me make sense of this, it was her. We met in a quiet cafe, and I told her everything. She listened intently, taking notes and asking questions. When I showed her the documents and the video, her eyes widened in shock. "This is huge," she said. "If this is real, it could change everything." She agreed to look into it further and promised to keep me updated. I felt a bit of relief knowing that I wasn't alone in this anymore, but I also knew that things were about to get even more dangerous. A few days later, I received a call from my journalist friend. She sounded shaken. "I've been followed," she said. "My apartment was broken into last night. They didn't take anything, but they left a message. They know I'm involved." We agreed to meet in a public place, somewhere we wouldn't be easily followed. She handed me a flash drive. "I found some more information," she said, "but be careful. They're watching us." I took the flash drive home and plugged it into an old laptop, one I hadn't used in years and wasn't connected to any of my accounts. The files contained more detailed information about the research facility and its connection to Area 51. There were internal memos, project reports, and even more blueprints for advanced technology. One document stood out. It was a report on an incident involving an alien craft that had crash-landed. According to the report, the craft was recovered and brought to the facility for study. The alien inside had survived and was being held in a secure location. The report detailed attempts to communicate with the being and the technology found inside the craft. Reading this, sent chills down my spine. If this was real, it meant that the government had been in contact with extraterrestrials for decades, possibly longer, and they had gone to great lengths to keep it a secret. As I was going through the files, I received another message from Unseen Truth. They know you have the information. Be prepared to leave at a moment's notice. I packed a bag with essentials and kept it by the door. I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. They were closing in, and I needed to be ready to disappear if it came to that. So, here I am, sharing this with all of you once again. Things are getting dangerous, and I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'll keep you updated as best I can. Stay safe, everyone, and remember, you deserve to know the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. Hey everyone, it's been a wild ride and I'm back to share the next part of my story. Thanks for all the support and advice so far. Your encouragement has kept me going through all the craziness. After receiving Unseen Truth's warning, I spent the next few days in a state of constant vigilance. Every noise outside my house made me jump. Every unfamiliar face set my heart racing. I knew I couldn't live like this forever, but I also knew I couldn't just let this go. The truth was too important. One night, as I was reviewing the files from the flash drive my journalist friend gave me, I received another message from Unseen Truth. This time it was more urgent. I have a contact who can help you. Meet him at the old train station, 3 a.m. Be careful. The old train station was a derelict building on the outskirts of town, long abandoned and overgrown with weeds. The perfect place for a secret meeting. I dressed in dark clothes and made my way there, avoiding the main roads and sticking to side streets. The station was dark and silent, the only light coming from a flickering street lamp nearby. I waited in the shadows, my nerves on edge. After what felt like an eternity, a man emerged from the darkness. He looked to be in his late 40s with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. He introduced himself as Michael, though I had a feeling that wasn't his real name. Michael didn't waste any time. He handed me a small encrypted USB drive. "This contains everything you need to blow this wide open," he said. "But you have to be careful. They're watching both of us." He went on to explain that he used to work for a contractor affiliated with Area 51. He had seen things that convinced him that the public needed to know the truth. He had been collecting evidence for years, waiting for the right moment to come forward. We talked for a while longer, and he told me about the shadowy figures who had tried to silence him. They had ruined his career, alienated him from his family, and made him a fugitive in his own country. But he was determined to expose the truth, no matter the cost. As we were talking, Michael suddenly tensed up. "We've been followed," he whispered. "We need to move." He led me through a maze of abandoned buildings, constantly checking over his shoulder. We finally emerged onto a quiet street and he handed me a burner phone. "Take this," he said. "I'll contact you when it's safe." With that, he disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a sense of growing dread. I made my way back home, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting to see those shadowy figures at any moment. When I got home, I plugged the USB drive into my old laptop. The files were encrypted, but Michael had given me the password. Inside, I found a treasure trove of documents, photos, and videos, detailed reports of alien encounters, blueprints for advanced technology, and even more evidence of the government's cover-up. One document in particular caught my eye. It was a report on a recent alien visit to Area 51. The report detailed a meeting between high-ranking officials and an alien delegation. According to the report, the aliens had come to renegotiate their agreement, demanding more resources in exchange for their technology. The report mentioned something about genetic material and human subjects, which sent a chill down my body. There were also photos, blurry but unmistakable, of alien crafts and even a few of the beings themselves. They looked eerily similar to the classic depictions: large heads, big black eyes, spindly bodies. It was hard to believe, but the evidence was overwhelming. The videos were the most disturbing, grainy footage of experiments being conducted on what looked like alien technology, and even more chilling, on human subjects. I couldn't watch for long. The images were too disturbing. I saved everything to multiple locations, making sure I had backups in case something happened to the original files. I knew I had to share this with the world, but I had to be smart about it. The people behind this cover-up were powerful and ruthless. I decided to reach out to a few trusted contacts, people I knew I could rely on to help me get the information out safely. As I prepared to go public, I received another message from Unseen Truth. They know what you have. Be ready to run. My paranoia was justified. The next day, I noticed more strange cars in my neighborhood, more unfamiliar faces. It was clear that they were closing in, and I needed to act fast. So here I am, sharing this with all of you once again. The evidence is out there, and I'm working with a few trusted people to get it to the right hands. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about exposing the truth and holding those responsible accountable. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I promise to keep you all updated as best I can. Stay safe, everyone, and remember, we have the right to know the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. Hey everyone, it's been a crazy ride, and I'm here to give you the final part of my story. I want to thank everyone who's been following along and offering support. It's meant more to me than you know. After receiving the warning from Unseen Truth that they were closing in, I knew I had to act fast. The paranoia was at an all-time high, and I couldn't afford to be careless. I packed a few essentials, grabbed the burner phone Michael had given me, and left my home, not sure when or if I'd be back. I drove to a safe house, a cabin in the woods that a friend had offered me years ago, just in case I ever needed to disappear. It was isolated, with no neighbors for miles, and it had a secure internet connection that couldn't easily be traced. From there, I reached out to my journalist friend and a few other trusted contacts. We coordinated a plan to release the information in a way that would be impossible to ignore. We decided to go through multiple reputable news outlets, ensuring that the story couldn't be easily suppressed. We spent days organizing the files, verifying the information, and preparing a detailed report. The evidence was overwhelming: documents, photos, videos, all pointing to a massive cover-up involving extraterrestrial beings and advanced technology. The public needed to see this, and we were determined to make it happen. Finally, the day came. We released the report simultaneously through several major news outlets, along with the full set of documents, photos, and videos. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media was flooded with posts, debates, and theories. News channels covered the story nonstop, and government officials were forced to respond. At first, the government tried to discredit the information, calling it a hoax and a fabrication. But as more and more evidence surfaced, their denials became less convincing. Independent experts began to verify the documents, confirming their authenticity. The pressure mounted, and it became clear that the truth could no longer be hidden. In the midst of all this, I received one last message from Unseen Truth. Well done. Stay safe. I haven't heard from him since, but I hope he's out there somewhere, knowing that his bravery helped expose one of the biggest secrets in human history. The fallout from the revelations was immense. There were congressional hearings, protests, and a public outcry for transparency and accountability. The government was forced to admit that they had been in contact with extraterrestrial beings for decades and had been developing advanced technology based on alien knowledge. The revelations also sparked a new era of scientific inquiry and exploration. Researchers around the world began to study the alien technology, leading to breakthroughs in energy, medicine, and transportation. It was a turning point for humanity, opening up possibilities we had only dreamed of. As for me, I've had to stay under the radar. The people behind the cover-up are still out there, and they're not happy about being exposed. But I don't regret anything. The truth is out, and that's what matters. I've decided to keep moving, staying one step ahead of those who might want to silence me. But I'm not alone. There's a growing community of people dedicated to uncovering the truth and holding those in power accountable. And I know that together, we can make a difference. So that's my story. It's been a wild ride, and it's far from over. But I'm hopeful for the future. We've taken the first step toward a new era of openness and discovery. And I believe that the best is yet to come. Stay safe, everyone, and keep seeking the truth. We deserve to know what's really out there. I've always been a tech enthusiast, dabbling in various corners of the internet. One late-night curiosity led me to the dark web, a place I had often heard about, but never dared to explore deeply. That night, I found myself in a chat room filled with conspiracy theorists and supposed whistleblowers. Most of it was the usual nonsense: aliens, government cover-ups, secret societies. But one user caught my attention. His username was Whistleblower51. Whistleblower51 claimed to be an ex-employee from Area 51. At first I rolled my eyes, but his detailed knowledge and the calm, almost clinical way he presented his information intrigued me. He said he was on the run because he had stolen a USB stick filled with classified data that the public was never meant to see. According to him, the government was conducting experiments that would make even the most hardened skeptics shiver. He started with a bombshell. They're working on time travel with alien technology. He explained that during the infamous Roswell incident, not only did they recover a spacecraft, but they also found alien technology that could manipulate time. Scientists at Area 51 had been working tirelessly to reverse engineer this tech. According to Whistleblower 51, they had limited success. He described it as crude and unpredictable, but enough to send objects a few seconds into the past or future. The chat room buzzed with excitement and skepticism. I was hooked. I needed more. Whistleblower 51 shared bits and pieces over the next few days, each more unsettling than the last. He claimed that the government wasn't just interested in time travel. They were also working on cloning humans to create super soldiers. Imagine an army of perfect soldiers, all cloned from the best specimens humanity has to offer, he wrote. They're not just identical. They're enhanced, stronger, faster, more resilient. But it didn't stop there. He revealed that they were developing advanced AI technologies designed to control these super soldiers. The AI was supposedly capable of learning and adapting in ways that were almost human-like. It's like giving them a brain, he said. Only this brain is devoid of empathy, fear, or hesitation. As I read these messages, a cold shiver ran down my spine. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but the way Whistleblower 51 described it, with such specific details and a sense of urgency, made it feel disturbingly real. I remember one particular night when Whistleblower 51 dropped a link to a file-sharing site. "This is it," he wrote. "Proof." My heart raced as I clicked on the link. The file was a series of documents and videos. The first document was a series of memos from what appeared to be high-ranking officials, discussing the progress of the time travel experiments. One memo mentioned a successful test where a small object was sent 10 seconds into the past. Another detailed the ethical concerns of cloning and how they were mitigated by selecting subjects who were deemed expendable. The videos were grainy, likely recorded with hidden cameras. The first video showed a lab with what looked like a futuristic machine in the center. Scientists in white lab coats bustled around, making adjustments and taking notes. Then there was the cloning facility. Rows of pods lined the walls, each containing a human figure in various stages of development. The most chilling video, though, was of a training exercise. Cloned soldiers moved in perfect unison, executing commands with terrifying precision, their faces expressionless. I sat there, staring at my screen, a mix of disbelief and fear. If this was real, it was beyond comprehension. But there was also a part of me that questioned the authenticity. Could this all be an elaborate hoax? After all, the dark web is notorious for its mix of truth and fiction. Still, the thought of such experiments being real was enough to keep me glued to my computer, waiting for the next revelation from Whistleblower 51. That's when he dropped the biggest bombshell of all. They know I'm leaking this. I don't have much time. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll share this with the world. I didn't know what to believe. Was this guy for real? Or was he just another troll seeking attention? I decided to stick around and see where this rabbit hole would lead. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would change my life forever. After that night, I became obsessed with Whistleblower 51's revelations. Every day I would check the chat room, hoping for more information. A few days passed with nothing new, and I began to worry. Had something happened to him? One night, my fears were confirmed. Whistleblower 51 posted a frantic message. "They found me. I'm on the run. If you don't hear from me again, share everything I've posted. The world needs to know." My heart pounded as I read his words. The chat room exploded with speculation and concern. Who were they? How did they find him? I decided to take action. I downloaded everything he had shared so far, creating backups on multiple devices. I wasn't sure if I believed everything he said, but if there was even a grain of truth to his claims, it was worth preserving. A few days later, a new user appeared in the chat room. His username was Seeker, and he claimed to have seen Whistleblower 51 in person. According to Seeker, Whistleblower 51 was now hiding in a remote location, constantly on the move to avoid capture. He said Whistleblower 51 had managed to send him more files before going completely dark. Seeker shared a new batch of documents and videos. These were even more disturbing than the last. One document detailed an experiment involving time travel on living subjects. The memo described how animals were used initially, but there were plans to test on human subjects soon. The ethical concerns were brushed aside with a chilling phrase. The potential benefits outweigh the moral implications. The new videos were equally unsettling. One showed a test subject, a small animal, disappearing and reappearing in a different part of the room. The timestamp on the video showed a difference of 15 seconds. Another video captured a briefing where scientists discussed the potential of using time travel as a weapon. "Imagine sending a bomb back in time," one scientist said. "We could change the course of history without anyone knowing." But it wasn't just time travel that they were experimenting with. Another document discussed AI integration with cloned soldiers. The goal was to create an army that could think and act independently, without the need for human commanders. The AI was designed to learn from every mission, improving its tactics and strategies. Autonomous warfare, the document called it. The most chilling document, though, was a list of names. These were people who had been volunteered for the cloning experiments. The list included homeless individuals, prisoners, and even some reported missing persons. It seemed that the government was willing to use anyone they deemed expendable for their experiments. One night, while sifting through these files, I received a private message from Seeker. "They're watching me too," he wrote. "I think they're on to us. We need to be careful." His message was followed by a string of code, coordinates. "Meet me here. We need to talk in person." My heart raced as I considered his proposition. Meeting a stranger from the dark web in person went against every instinct I had. But curiosity and a sense of duty compelled me. If what Whistleblower 51 and Seeker said was true, the world needed to know. I decided to go. The coordinates led me to an old abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was the perfect place for a secret meeting. I arrived just before midnight, my nerves on edge. The warehouse was dark and silent, except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. I spotted a figure standing in the shadows. "Seeker?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure stepped forward and I saw a young man, probably in his late 20s, with a nervous expression. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. We moved deeper into the warehouse where Seeker showed me a laptop. "I've been trying to piece together Whistleblower 51's data," he explained. "There's so much more than we realized." He opened several files, showing detailed schematics of the cloning pods and the AI integration systems. "This isn't just science fiction. It's real, and it's happening now." Suddenly, we heard a noise, a car engine followed by footsteps. "They're here," Seeker whispered, his face pale. "We need to go now." We grabbed the laptop and fled through a back exit, running as fast as we could. As we reached the edge of the property, I glanced back and saw men in dark suits entering the warehouse. We had barely escaped. We spent the night in a cheap motel going through the files and planning our next move. Seeker was convinced that we needed to go public, to share everything we had with the media. "It's the only way to stay safe," he argued, "if everyone knows they can't silence us." But I wasn't so sure. What if no one believed us? What if we were just putting ourselves in more danger? As dawn approached, we agreed to split up, to continue our investigation separately, and to share our findings online. We exchanged contact information and promised to stay in touch. As I drove home, exhaustion and fear battled within me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now a target, just like Whistleblower 51 and Seeker. But I also felt a strange sense of resolve. If what we had discovered was true, then the world needed to know. And I was willing to do whatever it took to uncover the truth. After the frantic night with Seeker, I returned home, my mind racing with questions and fear. Every creak of my house, every passing car outside, made me jump. I knew I needed to stay low, but I also needed to continue digging. The truth was too important to ignore. I decided to take a different approach. Instead of relying solely on the dark web, I began scouring public records and legitimate sources for any information that could corroborate Whistleblower 51's claims. I found nothing directly linking Area 51 to the experiments he described, but there were plenty of obscure references to advanced research and classified projects that piqued my interest. Weeks went by, and my paranoia grew. I felt like I was being watched. Sometimes I'd notice the same car parked near my house for hours, or I'd catch glimpses of people who seemed out of place. I kept my activities online to a minimum, using secure, encrypted channels to communicate with Seeker. One night, Seeker messaged me with urgency. "I've found something big," he wrote. "We need to meet again, but it has to be somewhere safer. I've got a friend who can help." He sent me coordinates to a remote cabin in the woods, a few hours' drive from my place. We agreed to meet there the next night. The drive to the cabin was tense. I constantly checked my rearview mirror, half expecting to see dark SUVs tailing me. When I finally arrived, the cabin looked deserted. I parked my car a distance away and approached cautiously. Seeker emerged from the shadows, accompanied by an older man he introduced as Doc. Doc was a former government scientist who had worked on several classified projects before becoming disillusioned and going off the grid. Inside the cabin, Doc showed us a series of encrypted files he had managed to acquire. These files contained detailed logs of experiments conducted at Area 51. The more I read, the more horrified I became. One log described a series of tests on human subjects using the time travel technology. The subjects reported severe psychological and physiological side effects, including disorientation, memory loss, and even premature aging. Another set of documents detailed the cloning experiments. They had achieved a disturbing level of success, creating clones that were virtually indistinguishable from the original humans. The clones were subjected to rigorous training, their physical and mental capabilities enhanced to create the perfect soldiers. But the most alarming part was the AI integration. The documents described how the AI systems were implanted into the clones. giving them the ability to learn and adapt at an unprecedented rate. The AI-controlled clones could execute complex missions with ruthless efficiency, devoid of any moral hesitation. Doc explained that the AI technology was far more advanced than anything publicly known. It was capable of making autonomous decisions, learning from its environment, and even developing its own strategies. It's not just about creating soldiers, Doc said. It's about creating a new form of life, one that's controlled and directed by the government. As we absorbed this information, the gravity of the situation hit us. This wasn't just about secret experiments. It was about the potential creation of an entirely new species, one that could be used for purposes we couldn't even imagine. Suddenly, our discussion was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Doc's face went pale. "They've found us," he said. "We need to leave now." We grabbed the documents and hurried out the back, disappearing into the dense forest. We could hear the shouts of men and the barking of dogs as we ran, our hearts pounding with fear. After what felt like hours of running, we finally stopped to catch our breath. Doc led us to a hidden bunker, a relic from the Cold War era. It was small but well-stocked, with enough supplies to last us a few days. We huddled inside, trying to come up with a plan. "We need to get this information out," Seeker said. "But we can't just dump it online. We need to find a way to make people believe it, to show them that this isn't just some conspiracy theory." Doc nodded. "We need to find credible sources, people who can verify this information and help us expose it. But that's not going to be easy. The government will do everything they can to silence us." As we discussed our next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in way over our heads. But there was no turning back now. We had seen too much and we knew too much. If we didn't act, these experiments would continue unchecked, with potentially catastrophic consequences. Over the next few days, we worked tirelessly, contacting journalists, scientists, and anyone else we thought might be able to help. We used encrypted communications and burner phones, trying to stay one step ahead of our pursuers. It was a constant game of cat and mouse with no guarantee of success. One evening, we received a breakthrough. A well-known investigative journalist, someone with a reputation for exposing government stuff, agreed to meet us. He had connections and resources that could help us bring the truth to light. The meeting was set for the next night at a secluded location. As we prepared for the meeting, a sense of hope mixed with dread filled the air. This could be our chance to expose the truth, but it could also be a trap. We had to be careful, but we also had to take the risk. The stakes were too high to do otherwise. The drive to the meeting place felt like an eternity. Every bump in the road, every distant headlight set my nerves on edge. Seeker, Doc, and I barely spoke, each lost in our thoughts and fears. The secluded spot we had chosen was an abandoned factory on the outskirts of a small town, far from prying eyes. We arrived early, scouting the area to ensure it wasn't a setup. The journalist, known only as Anderson, had a reputation for taking on risky stories, but we couldn't afford to be careless. Finally, as the clock struck midnight, a single car approached. Anderson stepped out, a tall, middle-aged man with a serious expression. "You must be Seeker," he said, shaking hands with each of us. "Let's get this done quickly. If what you've got is as explosive as you say, we don't have much time." Inside the factory, we set up a makeshift workspace. Doc pulled out the laptop and began showing Anderson the files. As he scrolled through the documents and videos, Anderson's eyes widened. "This is incredible. If this is real, it's the biggest story of the century." "It's real," Seeker replied, "and we need your help to make sure the world sees it." Anderson nodded. "I have contacts who can verify this, but we need to act fast. Once this goes public, they'll come down on us hard. We need to ensure it's too big for them to cover up." For the next few hours, we worked tirelessly, sending files to Anderson's trusted contacts, preparing a comprehensive dossier, and drafting a story that would blow the lid off Area 51's secret experiments. Anderson recorded interviews with Doc, Seeker, and me, capturing our first-hand accounts of the discoveries and the dangers we faced. Just as we were wrapping up, a loud crash echoed through the factory. Men in dark suits burst in, weapons drawn. "Freeze! Don't move!" one of them shouted. My heart raced as we raised our hands in surrender. They quickly confiscated the laptop and all our devices, destroying any chance we had of revealing the truth. "You've meddled in things you don't understand," one of the men said, his voice cold and menacing. "You're coming with us." They herded us into a black van, blindfolding us to prevent us from seeing where we were being taken. The ride was long and silent, filled with a growing sense of dread. When we finally stopped, they led us into what felt like an underground facility. The blindfolds were removed, and we found ourselves in a sterile, dimly lit room. A man in a lab coat stood before us, his face obscured by shadows. "You've uncovered some very sensitive information," he said calmly. "But there are things in this world that are better left hidden." Doc stepped forward. "People have a right to know. You can't just bury the truth." The man sighed. "Perhaps. But sometimes the truth is more dangerous than the lie. You've seen what we're capable of. Do you really think the public is ready for that?" Before we could respond, he motioned to the guards who escorted us to separate rooms. They interrogated us for hours, trying to extract information about who else knew and where we had hidden the data. Despite the fear and intimidation, we held our ground, revealing nothing. Days turned into weeks. They kept us in isolation, feeding us just enough to keep us alive but not enough to give us strength. Occasionally, they'd come back with new threats and offers of leniency in exchange for cooperation, but we refused. One night, the routine changed. The door to my cell opened, and a guard motioned for me to follow. They led me to a different room, where Seeker and Doc were already waiting, looking worn but defiant. Anderson was there too, looking surprisingly calm. "I've negotiated a deal," Anderson said. "They're going to let us go, on the condition that we never speak of this again." "What about the information?" Doc asked. "They've destroyed it," Anderson replied. "But I have backups hidden. If anything happens to us, the truth will still get out." The man in the lab coat entered the room. "You're free to go. But remember, we'll be watching. Any attempt to share what you've seen will be met with consequences." We were escorted out of the facility and released on the outskirts of a city, disoriented and weak but alive. Anderson had a car waiting, and we drove in silence, each lost in our thoughts. The gravity of what we had experienced weighed heavily on us. In the weeks that followed, we tried to return to our normal lives, but nothing felt the same. We were constantly looking over our shoulders, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Anderson's story was never published, but he assured us that the backups were safe. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. The truth was still out there, hidden but not forgotten. And as long as people like Whistleblower 51, Seeker, Doc, and Anderson existed, there was hope that one day the world would know the secrets of Area 51. Life after our release was a constant state of vigilance. Each of us tried to return to normalcy, but the weight of what we had uncovered and the constant fear of being watched made it nearly impossible. Despite the threats, we knew that the information we had was too important to be buried forever. I continued my research discreetly, avoiding any online activities that could be traced back to me. Seeker and I maintained contact through secure, encrypted channels, always careful about what we shared and how we communicated. Doc had gone completely off the grid, living in a remote area with no internet access. Anderson, true to his word, kept the backups hidden and safe, ready to be released if anything happened to us. Months passed and we heard nothing from our captors. It seemed like they had decided to leave us alone as long as we kept our silence. But the quiet made us restless. We knew that the secrets we held were too significant to remain hidden forever. One evening, I received an unexpected message from Seeker. "I think I've found a way to get the truth out," he wrote. He explained that he had been in contact with a group of hackers known for exposing government stuff. They had the skills and resources to disseminate the information widely and anonymously, making it nearly impossible for the authorities to suppress. We arranged a meeting with the hackers, using all the precautions we had learned to avoid detection. The meeting took place in an old, abandoned church, its crumbling walls providing a stark reminder of the passage of time and the secrets held within. The leader of the group, a woman known only as Cypher, listened intently as we explained our situation. "We can help you," she said, her voice steady and reassuring. "But once this goes out, there's no turning back. You'll be putting your lives on the line." We exchanged glances, each of us understanding the risks, but also knowing that we had come too far to stop now. "We're ready," Seeker replied. Over the next few days, Cypher and her team worked tirelessly, preparing the data for release. They created a secure website and a network of mirrors to ensure that the information would be accessible from multiple points, making it harder for the government to shut down. They also contacted trusted journalists and media outlets, providing them with the information needed to verify and report on the story. The night before the scheduled release, we gathered one last time. There was a sense of finality in the air, a recognition that our lives were about to change irrevocably. Anderson had prepared a comprehensive article detailing our journey and the evidence we had uncovered. "This is it," he said, looking at us with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Tomorrow, the world will know." The release went off without a hitch. As the information spread, it quickly gained traction, with news outlets picking up the story and social media ablaze with discussions and debates. The revelations about time travel, cloning, and AI integration at Area 51 shocked the world. The government issued a series of denials, but the sheer volume of evidence made it impossible to dismiss entirely. Public opinion was divided. Some people believed us, others thought it was an elaborate hoax. But the important thing was that the information was out there, and people were talking about it. Whistleblower 51's warnings had not been in vain. In the aftermath, we took steps to protect ourselves. Seeker and I continued to live quietly, always wary of any unusual activity around us. Doc remained hidden, his knowledge too valuable to risk exposure. Anderson continued his work as a journalist, using his platform to advocate for transparency and accountability. The world had changed, and so had we. The secrets of Area 51 were no longer hidden, but their full implications were still unfolding. There were debates about the ethics of the experiments, the potential dangers of the technologies, and the need for oversight and regulation. One thing was certain: we had made a difference. The truth, once hidden in the shadows, was now in the light. And while our journey had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, we knew that we had done the right thing. As time passed, I often thought about Whistleblower and the courage it took for him to leak the information. His sacrifice had set us on this path, and his legacy was the truth we had helped to reveal. The world was watching now, and there was no turning back. And so, life went on. We remained vigilant, knowing that the fight for truth and justice was never truly over. But we also found solace in the fact that, against all odds, we had brought the secrets of Area 51 into the open, and that, we hoped, would make the world a better place. Hey everyone, this is my first post and I feel a bit anxious about sharing this, but I can't keep it to myself anymore. Recently, I stumbled upon something truly disturbing on the dark web, and I need to get it off my chest. Before you jump to conclusions, let me clarify. I'm not a conspiracy nut. This all started as innocent curiosity, but what I found has been keeping me up at night. This is just part one of my story, and it might be a bit long, but I promise it's worth the read. I've always been a tech geek, fascinated by the mysteries of the internet. I've read countless stories about the dark web, but never ventured there myself. That all changed a few weeks ago. I decided to take a dive into the depths of the internet, mostly out of boredom and curiosity. I set up a secure browser, took all the necessary precautions, and began my exploration. I browsed through various forums, marketplaces, and chat rooms, but nothing seemed too out of the ordinary, just the usual shady stuff. Then I came across a thread titled, "The Real Gates of Hell." The title caught my eye immediately. I've always been intrigued by myths and legends, so I clicked on it. The thread started with a user, who I'll call Darkseeker, describing a place in Turkmenistan known as the Door to Hell, or the Darvaza gas crater. Most people know it as a tourist attraction, a giant burning pit in the desert that's been on fire for decades. But Darkseeker claimed that what we see in tourist photos is just the surface. According to them, there's much more hidden beneath, something the Turkmenistan government is desperate to keep secret. Darkseeker shared a link to a private site on the dark web, saying it contained videos and documents that prove their claims. Against my better judgment, I followed the link. The site was basic, with a black background and white text, almost like it was deliberately made to look amateurish. There were several video files and PDF documents available for download. The titles were eerie: Voices Below, Hidden Chambers, Unseen Footage. I started with the videos. The first one, Voices Below, was shot by someone standing at the edge of the crater. The camera panned over the burning pit, but then it zoomed in on something I'd never seen before: a narrow passageway leading down into the crater. As the camera moved closer, I could hear faint whispers, almost like a chorus of voices murmuring in the background. The video quality was grainy, but the sound was clear enough to send chills down my spine. The next video, Hidden Chambers, was even more unsettling. It showed a group of people, presumably explorers, descending into the crater through that passageway. The footage was shaky, and the lighting was poor, but it was obvious they were heading deep underground. At one point, they stopped in front of what looked like a massive, ancient door. The door was covered in strange symbols, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. As they pushed it open, the whispers grew louder, almost deafening. The video cut off abruptly after that, leaving me with more questions than answers. I decided to take a break from the videos and check out the documents. One PDF file titled Theories and Evidence provided detailed accounts of people who claimed to have heard voices near the crater. These weren't just random tourists. Some were scientists and researchers who had visited the site for various studies. The document also mentioned strange electromagnetic readings and unexplained disappearances around the area. I couldn't stop myself from diving deeper into this rabbit hole. The more I read and watched, the more convinced I became that there was something genuinely sinister about the Darvaza crater. But it wasn't just the content that disturbed me. It was the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me as I explored this hidden corner of the internet. I know this all sounds like a conspiracy theory, and maybe it is, but there's something about those videos and documents that felt too real to ignore. Hey everyone, thanks for the positive feedback on part 1. I didn't expect so many of you to be interested in my experience. As promised, here's part 2 of my story. After spending an entire evening engrossed in the videos and documents from the dark website, I found myself unable to sleep. The images of that ancient door and the eerie whispers echoed in my mind. The next morning, I decided to continue my investigation, this time with a clearer head. I started with another video titled Unseen Footage. This one was different from the others. It seemed to be a compilation of various clips, some shot professionally, while others looked like they were taken with a shaky handheld camera. The first clip was from a documentary about the Darvaza gas crater, showing the familiar fiery pit we all know. But then, it cut to behind-the-scenes footage of the film crew. They were setting up their equipment when one of them pointed out a narrow, barely visible path leading away from the crater. The camera followed them as they decided to explore it. As they ventured down this path, the atmosphere changed. The air looked thicker, almost foggy, and the ambient sounds of the desert were replaced by a low hum. The crew exchanged nervous glances but continued forward. Suddenly, the hum intensified, and the whispers began. This time, they were clearer, almost as if they were speaking a language I couldn't understand. The camera captured the crew's fear as they hurried back to the main crater, clearly unsettled by what they had encountered. The next clip was the most disturbing. It showed a group of people, dressed in what looked like traditional Turkmen clothing, standing around the crater at night. They seemed to be performing some kind of ritual, chanting in unison. The video quality was poor, but the sound of their voices was haunting. The camera zoomed in on their faces, showing expressions of intense concentration and, oddly, fear. As their chanting grew louder, the ground around them began to tremble slightly. The video cut off abruptly, leaving me with a sense of unease. I moved on to the last video file, titled Research Findings. This one was a series of interviews with various experts who had studied the crater. One of the interviews was with a geologist who had visited the site multiple times. He spoke about the unusual magnetic fields and strange seismic activity around the crater. According to him, the readings were unlike anything he'd ever encountered, suggesting there was something very unusual about the area. Another interview was with a historian who had researched local legends and folklore. He mentioned stories passed down through generations about a gateway to the underworld located in the region. According to these tales, the crater was more than just a natural gas fire. It was a portal to another realm, guarded by ancient spirits. He admitted these were just legends, but the conviction in his voice suggested he believed there was some truth to them. After watching these videos, I turned my attention back to the documents. One file caught my eye: personal accounts. It was a collection of stories from people who had experienced strange phenomena near the crater. One account was from a scientist who claimed to have heard voices calling his name while he was alone at the site. Another was from a tourist who described seeing shadowy figures moving around the edges of the crater at night. The most chilling account was from a local man who had grown up in a nearby village. He recounted a story his grandmother had told him about a time when the crater was not yet burning. According to her, the village elders had always warned children to stay away from the area, claiming it was cursed. She spoke of people who had gone missing near the crater, never to be seen again. The villagers believed these disappearances were the work of evil spirits that inhabited the area. Reading these accounts and watching the videos left me with an overwhelming sense of dread. I knew I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had anticipated. The combination of scientific anomalies, ancient legends, and personal testimonies painted a picture that was hard to dismiss. I spent the next few days trying to find more information online, but everything I found on the regular web was surface level, focusing on the tourist aspect of the crater. It seemed like the deeper, darker truths were being deliberately kept out of the public eye. I even tried reaching out to Darkseeker, but my messages went unanswered. There was one more document I hadn't opened yet, titled Government Involvement. I'll share what I found in Part 3, but I can tell you now that things only got more disturbing from here. Stay tuned, and as always, be careful with what you explore on the internet. Some doors are better left unopened. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this journey. Your support and curiosity have kept me going. After a few sleepless nights and countless hours spent poring over the materials I had found, I felt compelled to open the last document titled Government Involvement. I had a sinking feeling that this file would reveal the most disturbing details yet. The document started with a summary of various official statements made by the Turkmenistan government about the Darvaza gas crater. These statements painted the crater as a natural wonder and a harmless tourist attraction. However, as I read further, it became clear that there was a lot more going on behind the scenes. The first few pages detailed a series of government-funded expeditions to the crater. These expeditions were conducted under the guise of scientific research, but the document suggested they had a much darker purpose. One report, dated several years ago, described a team of geologists and engineers who were sent to the crater with advanced equipment. Their mission was to explore the underground chambers and tunnels that supposedly lay beneath the burning pit. The report included transcripts of radio communications between the team and their base. As they descended into the crater, their initial excitement quickly turned to fear. They described hearing strange noises, like whispers and distant screams echoing through the tunnels. One of the team members reported seeing shadowy figures moving in the darkness. Despite their growing unease, they pressed on, driven by orders from their superiors. The transcripts abruptly ended with a chilling message. "We've found something. It's not natural. We need to get out of here." There were no further communications from the team, and the report concluded with a brief note stating that the expedition had been deemed classified and all records were sealed. The document went on to discuss a series of disappearances in the area surrounding the crater. Over the past few decades, numerous locals and tourists had vanished without a trace. While some of these cases were officially labeled as accidents or natural causes, the document hinted at a more sinister explanation. It suggested that these disappearances were connected to the underground chambers and the entities that supposedly inhabited them. One section of the document contained excerpts from declassified intelligence reports. These reports detailed covert operations aimed at containing whatever was lurking beneath the crater. They described how special forces teams were deployed to the area, equipped with advanced technology to detect and neutralize any threats. The reports hinted at encounters with unknown entities, but the details were heavily redacted, leaving much to the imagination. The most disturbing part of the document was a series of interviews with former government officials and scientists who had worked on the crater project. They spoke of a powerful secret organization within the government, dedicated to studying and controlling paranormal phenomena. According to them, the Darvaza crater was just one of many sites around the world where these phenomena occurred. They claimed that the government was actively covering up the true nature of these sites to prevent public panic. One of the interviews stood out to me. It was with a former scientist who had led several expeditions to the crater. He described how, during one mission, they had discovered an ancient artifact buried deep within the tunnels. The artifact was covered in strange symbols and emitted a faint, otherworldly glow. As they examined it, they began to hear whispers, even louder and clearer than before. The scientist claimed that the artifact was a portal, a gateway to another dimension inhabited by malevolent entities. He went on to explain that the government had taken extreme measures to keep this discovery a secret. The artifact was removed and placed in a secure facility, and all records of its existence were erased. The scientist expressed his deep regret for being part of the cover-up and warned that the entities from the other dimension were growing stronger, feeding off the energy from the burning crater. Reading these accounts left me shaken. It was clear that there was something very real and very dangerous hidden beneath the Darvaza crater. The combination of scientific anomalies, government conspiracies, and personal testimonies painted a picture that was hard to ignore. I decided to take a break from the documents and revisit the videos. There was one more file I hadn't watched yet, simply titled The Encounter. I'll share what I found in part 4, but I can tell you now that it was the most disturbing video yet. Hey everyone, thanks again for your patience and continued interest. As promised, here's part 4. Let's dive into the next part of this unsettling journey. After reading the document on government involvement, I was left with a deep sense of dread. The combination of scientific anomalies, hidden expeditions, and personal testimonies painted a picture that was hard to ignore. But there was still one video I hadn't watched yet. The Encounter. I hesitated for a moment before clicking play. The video began with a timestamp indicating it was recorded a few years ago. The footage was shaky and dimly lit, clearly taken with a handheld camera. It opened with a group of people, presumably explorers or researchers, standing at the edge of the Darvaza crater. They were speaking in hushed tones, discussing their plan to explore the underground chambers. As they descended into the crater, the camera captured the flickering flames and the eerie glow of the fire reflecting off the rocky walls. The deeper they went, the darker it became, and the whispers started again. Unlike the previous videos, these whispers were louder and seemed to be coming from all directions. The group exchanged nervous glances but pressed on, their determination outweighing their fear. The camera then focused on a narrow passageway that led deeper underground. As they entered, the air grew thicker and the whispers turned into faint, indistinguishable voices. The passageway eventually opened into a large cavern, illuminated by their flashlights. The walls were covered in strange symbols, similar to the ones I had seen in the previous videos. In the center of the cavern stood a stone pedestal, and on it lay the artifact the scientist had described in the interviews. The artifact was a small, intricately carved object that emitted a faint, otherworldly glow. As the camera zoomed in, the voices grew louder and more distinct. It was as if the artifact was a beacon, drawing the whispers closer. Suddenly, one of the explorers reached out to touch the artifact. The moment his fingers made contact, the voices erupted into a cacophony of screams. The ground began to shake and the cavern was filled with a blinding light. The camera footage became erratic, capturing glimpses of shadowy figures moving in the periphery. The screams grew louder and the explorers began to panic. The camera was dropped, and the footage became even more chaotic. The sounds of running footsteps, desperate shouts, and the deafening roar of the cavern collapsing filled the audio. The last thing the camera captured was a figure, silhouetted against the blinding light, reaching out towards the artifact. The video then cut to black, leaving only the sounds of the cavern crumbling and the voices fading into silence. The screen went blank, and I was left staring at the empty player, my heart racing. This was, by far, the most disturbing video I had seen. It wasn't just the visual content, but the sheer terror in the voices of the explorers that haunted me. I took a deep breath and tried to process what I had just watched. The implications were clear. There was something ancient and malevolent beneath the Darvaza crater. The artifact, the voices, the shadowy figures, all pointed to a reality far more terrifying than any myth or legend. I couldn't shake the feeling that the government was right to keep this hidden. The public wasn't ready for the truth, and neither was I. Despite the fear, a part of me wanted to uncover more. There were still unanswered questions and I needed closure. I decided to reach out to a few contacts I had in the tech and research communities to see if they knew anything about these expeditions or the artifact. I also planned to continue searching the dark web for any additional information or clues. In the meantime, I needed to share what I had discovered with all of you. The dark web is a place full of hidden horrors and unspeakable truths, and I had only scratched the surface. I knew that delving deeper would be dangerous, but I felt compelled to continue. Stay safe, everyone, and please, if you're tempted to explore the dark web, tread carefully. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this intense journey. Here's the final part of my story. After the terrifying experience of watching the encounter, I knew I needed to find more answers. I reached out to a few trusted contacts in the tech and research communities, hoping they could shed some light on the government expeditions and the artifact. Meanwhile, I continued my search on the dark web, treading carefully to avoid attracting unwanted attention. One of my contacts, a former cybersecurity expert, managed to track down a few more leads. He found an old forum where people discussed various conspiracy theories and paranormal phenomena. Among the threads, there was one about the Darvaza crater. The posts were filled with speculation, but one user, going by the name Whisper Watcher, seemed to have insider knowledge. They claimed to have worked on a classified project related to the crater and offered to share more information privately. I reached out to Whisper Watcher, explaining what I had discovered so far and asking for any additional details. To my surprise, they responded quickly. They confirmed that the government had been involved in covert operations at the crater for decades. According to them, the crater was indeed a portal to another dimension, and the artifact was the key to opening it. They warned me to be careful, stating that those who got too close often disappeared without a trace. Whisper Watcher shared some documents that were even more detailed than the ones I had previously found. These included blueprints of the underground chambers and tunnels, along with notes on the artifact's origins. The artifact, it turned out, was not of this world. It was an ancient relic, created by a civilization that had long since vanished. The symbols on the artifact were a form of writing, a warning to those who found it. The documents also contained accounts from other expeditions. One particularly chilling report described a team that had gone missing entirely. Their last communication mentioned finding a massive door deep within the tunnels, similar to the one I had seen in the videos. They reported hearing a low hum and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread before the transmission abruptly ended. As I delved deeper into these findings, I felt a growing sense of unease. Everything pointed to the fact that the crater was far more than just a natural gas fire. It was a gateway, guarded by ancient, malevolent entities. The whispers, the shadowy figures, and the disappearances were all connected to this otherworldly portal. Despite the fear, I knew I had to share what I had found with the world. I compiled all the documents, videos, and testimonies into a comprehensive report. Before posting it online, I reached out to a few journalists and researchers, hoping they would help verify and amplify the information. Most of them dismissed it as a wild conspiracy theory, but a few took it seriously and agreed to investigate further. As I prepared to upload my report, I received one final message from Whisper Watcher. They warned me that I was being watched and that I needed to be careful. They suggested I go off the grid for a while just to be safe. I heeded their advice and decided to lay low for a bit, using secure channels to share my findings. The response to my report was mixed. Some people were fascinated and believed every word, while others dismissed it as fiction. Regardless of the reactions, I felt a sense of relief. I had shared the truth, or at least what I believed to be the truth, and it was now up to others to decide what to make of it. In the weeks that followed, I kept a low profile, occasionally checking in with the journalists and researchers who had taken an interest in the story. Some reported strange occurrences, like receiving anonymous threats or noticing unfamiliar cars parked near their homes. It seemed the more we dug, the more we attracted unwanted attention. As for the Darvaza crater, it remains a popular tourist destination, with most visitors unaware of the dark secrets that lie beneath. The government continues to promote it as a natural wonder, keeping the true nature of the site hidden from the public. My experience with the dark web has left me wary, but also more knowledgeable. There are many hidden corners of the internet, and some doors are indeed better left unopened. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that curiosity can lead you down paths you never expected, and sometimes the truth is more terrifying than fiction. Thank you for following my journey. Stay safe, and remember, some mysteries are better left unsolved. It all started innocently enough, as these things often do. It was late, past midnight, and I was in one of those deep internet rabbit holes you find yourself in when sleep won't come. You know the kind, clicking link after link, chasing after some elusive piece of trivia or urban legend. That night, my curiosity took me to the fringes of the web, a place I knew existed but had never really ventured into: the dark web. For those unfamiliar, the dark web is a collection of websites that exist on an encrypted network and cannot be accessed by traditional search engines or browsers. It's a place known for its anonymity and, let's be honest, its shady reputation. But it's also a haven for whistleblowers, activists, and, as I would soon find out, conspiracy theorists. I stumbled upon a forum that appeared to be a mishmash of discussions ranging from the mundane to the bizarre. Threads about government cover-ups, alien sightings, and the supernatural filled the page. It was fascinating, like peeking into a world where the rules of reality were more flexible, where people shared stories and secrets that would be dismissed outright in the daylight. One thread in particular caught my eye. It was titled "The Hidden Inventions of Nikola Tesla." Now, I've always been a bit of a Tesla enthusiast. The man was a genius, his contributions to science and technology undeniable, yet his name often seemed overshadowed by the likes of Edison. I clicked on the thread, expecting to find the usual speculative fare, maybe some talk about Tesla coils or wireless electricity. But what I found was something entirely different. The original post was from a user named Electromystic. He claimed to have stumbled upon an obscure blueprint of a device that Tesla had supposedly designed but never revealed to the public. According to Electromystic, this device was capable of something extraordinary: teleportation. My heart raced as I read through his detailed description of the machine, which used a series of specific frequencies to move objects, and potentially even people, from one place to another instantaneously. I was skeptical, of course. Who wouldn't be? The idea of teleportation is the stuff of science fiction, not reality. But there was something about the way Electromystic wrote, his technical explanations, the references to Tesla's lesser-known papers, that gave me pause. Could there be a kernel of truth in this wild claim? Scrolling through the replies, I saw a mix of reactions. Some users dismissed the post as nonsense, while others seemed genuinely intrigued. A few even claimed to have seen similar blueprints before, though none provided any evidence. The thread went on for pages, a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole, drawing me deeper into the mystery. Then, a reply from Electromystic himself appeared, offering to share the blueprint with anyone interested. All we had to do was contact him directly. It felt like a dare, one of those moments where you know you should turn back, but curiosity pushes you forward. Without thinking too much about it, I sent him a message. I didn't expect a reply, at least not right away. But within minutes, my inbox pinged with a response. Electromystic was surprisingly forthcoming. He provided a link to a hidden server where I could download the blueprint, along with a warning. This device is not a toy. Handle it with extreme caution. Against my better judgment, I followed the link. The download was quick, the file small. I opened it up, and there it was, a series of intricate diagrams and handwritten notes, all attributed to Nikola Tesla. The technical jargon was beyond my comprehension, but I could see it was a detailed plan for constructing a machine unlike anything I'd ever seen. I spent the rest of the night poring over the blueprint, trying to make sense of it. My mind raced with possibilities. What if this was real? What if Tesla had indeed discovered a way to teleport objects? And why had this invention been hidden for so long? As dawn broke, I realized I was in too deep to turn back. The blueprint was in my possession, and with it, the tantalizing possibility of uncovering one of history's greatest secrets. But as I would soon discover, some secrets are buried for a reason, and digging them up can lead to consequences beyond imagination. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of excitement mixed with dread. I kept the blueprint securely saved on a flash drive, only opening it when I was alone. Every free moment was spent deciphering the details, trying to understand the mechanics of the machine Tesla had designed. It was complex, filled with references to frequencies, electromagnetic fields, and materials I'd never heard of. I reached out to a friend of mine, James, who was an electrical engineer. Without revealing too much, I asked him for help interpreting some of the more technical aspects. He was intrigued but skeptical, and it took some convincing to get him on board. We spent hours dissecting the blueprint, discussing its feasibility. James was fascinated by the meticulous detail and the innovative use of frequencies to manipulate matter. He confirmed that, while it was far-fetched, the science behind it wasn't entirely impossible. This revelation only fueled my determination to see the experiment through. The next step was gathering the materials. Some were easy to obtain, standard electrical components and wires. Others, like the rare metals specified for the core of the device, were trickier. After much searching and spending more money than I care to admit, we finally had everything we needed. We decided to set up the device in James's garage. It was secluded enough to keep our activities private, and his array of tools and equipment made it the ideal workspace. Over the next few weeks, we painstakingly followed Tesla's blueprint, assembling the machine piece by piece. The device itself wasn't large, about the size of a small refrigerator, but its complexity was intimidating. Cables and coils intertwined in a seemingly chaotic manner, all centered around a core chamber where the teleportation was supposed to occur. As we worked, a sense of unease began to settle over me. There were moments when I considered stopping, questioning the wisdom of tampering with something so unknown. But curiosity, and perhaps a touch of hubris, drove me forward. James seemed to share my unease, but was equally captivated by the challenge. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of meticulous labor, the device was complete. We double-checked every connection, every setting, ensuring everything was as per Tesla's specifications. It was time for the first test. We decided to start small, using an inanimate object, a simple metal coin. Placing it in the core chamber, we stepped back and powered on the machine. The device hummed to life, the coils glowing faintly as the frequencies began to resonate. I could feel the hairs on my arms stand up, a tangible manifestation of the energy in the room. With a final adjustment, we activated the teleportation sequence. The hum grew louder, and for a moment the coin seemed to shimmer. Then, with a flash of light, it vanished. The room fell silent, the only sound our breathing as we stared at the empty chamber. James quickly moved to the receiver unit we had set up on the other side of the garage. To our astonishment, the coin was there, slightly warm to the touch, but otherwise unchanged. We had done it. We had teleported an object. The initial elation was overwhelming. We celebrated, marveling at our success. But as the excitement faded, the reality of what we had achieved set in. This was a power beyond anything we had ever encountered, and with it came responsibility. We continued our experiments, teleporting larger objects and refining the process. Each success bolstered our confidence, but the underlying unease remained. The machine was a marvel, but it was also unpredictable. There were fluctuations in the energy levels, moments where the objects would reappear slightly altered, or worse, not at all. One evening, as we were wrapping up another test, James voiced what we had both been thinking. We need to be careful with this. There's a reason Tesla never revealed this to the world. I nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. We had unlocked a secret that could change everything, but at what cost? The more we experimented, the more I felt like we were playing with forces beyond our control. As we shut down the machine for the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of something profound and terrifying. The blueprint had led us to an incredible discovery, but the journey was far from over, and deep down I feared the consequences of pushing further. The weeks that followed were a blur of excitement and mounting tension. Each successful teleportation fueled our determination to understand and master the device. We meticulously logged every variable, trying to pinpoint the factors that influenced the outcomes. Yet for every success there were anomalies, objects that reappeared altered, as if they had been reconstructed imperfectly. One night, after a particularly unsettling experiment where a small wooden block came back scorched and warped, James suggested we take a break. We need to regroup, maybe do more research on Tesla's notes. There has to be something we're missing. I agreed, though it was hard to step away. The machine had a magnetic pull, its potential too immense to ignore. But James was right. We were diving into the unknown without a full understanding of the risks. That weekend, I buried myself in Tesla's papers, scouring for any mention of the device. Hidden among his more well-known works, I found fragments, hints that he had indeed been wary of his invention's power. Tesla's notes spoke of dimensional instabilities and resonance harmonics, terms that seemed to describe the very anomalies we were encountering. It was during one of these late-night study sessions that I received another message from Electromystic. His tone was more urgent this time, filled with warnings. He claimed to have tried the device himself and experienced terrifying results. Objects disappearing entirely, strange noises, and even a sense of being watched. He urged me to stop, saying that the machine was too dangerous. The message rattled me. Until then, Electromystic had seemed like just another eccentric enthusiast, but now his warnings felt ominous. I shared the message with James, who was equally disturbed. We decided to halt our experiments until we could better understand the machine's risks. Days turned into weeks, and our lives slowly returned to normal. Yet the device loomed in the back of my mind, a constant reminder of the unfinished mystery. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of something monumental, something that could change our understanding of reality itself. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself back in James's garage, staring at the dormant machine. The urge to continue the experiments was overwhelming. I called James, who, despite his reservations, agreed to join me. We both knew the risks, but curiosity, that insatiable drive, pushed us forward. We decided to test a living organism, something small and simple. A houseplant seemed like a safe choice. Placing it in the core chamber, we activated the device. The familiar hum filled the room, the coils glowing as the frequencies aligned. The plant shimmered and vanished. James and I held our breath, waiting for the plant to reappear in the receiver. Moments later it did, intact and seemingly unharmed. We examined it closely, checking for any signs of damage. It looked perfectly normal, down to the last leaf. For a moment, relief washed over us, but then I noticed something strange. The soil around the plant's roots was slightly different, a darker shade and oddly damp. It was a minor detail, but it unsettled me. Had the plant really returned as it was, or had something changed during the teleportation? Over the next few days, I kept the plant in my home, observing it closely. It seemed healthy, even thriving more than usual. But there were odd moments, times when the leaves would rustle as if brushed by an unseen hand, or a faint hum that seemed to emanate from the soil. One evening, as I was watering it, I heard a soft whisper, barely audible. I froze, heart pounding, listening intently. The whisper came again, clearer this time. It was my name. Terrified, I called James, recounting the incident. He was skeptical, but agreed to come over. Together we examined the plant, trying to rationalize the phenomenon. Was it stress, fatigue, or something more sinister? We decided to set up a camera to monitor the plant overnight. The next morning, we reviewed the footage. At first, everything seemed normal. But then, in the dead of night, the plant's leaves began to move, swaying gently as if caressed by an invisible breeze. And then, unmistakably, came the whisper, "Help me." The realization hit us like a punch. We had opened a door to something we didn't understand, something potentially dangerous. The teleportation device was more than a machine. It was a portal to unknown dimensions, realms that Tesla had only glimpsed and wisely chosen to abandon. Our experiments had to stop. We couldn't risk further interaction with whatever forces we had awakened. But as we dismantled the machine, piece by piece, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. The blueprint, the whispers, and the plant all pointed to a deeper mystery, one that might never truly be resolved. Dismantling the machine was a laborious task, but it felt like the right move. James and I worked in silence, each lost in our thoughts. As the device came apart, I felt a mix of relief and regret. We had uncovered something extraordinary, but it was too dangerous to continue. I took the plant outside, placing it in the garden. Its eerie whispers had stopped, but I couldn't bear to keep it inside. The night after we dismantled the machine, I slept for the first time in weeks without dreams of shimmering objects or haunting voices. But peace was short-lived. A few nights later, I was jolted awake by a loud bang. Groggy and disoriented, I stumbled out of bed and followed the sound to my study. There, I found the flash drive containing Tesla's blueprint lying on the floor, as if it had been thrown. I was certain I had left it in a drawer. Unease prickled at the back of my neck. Something wasn't right. The next day, I called James. He hadn't experienced anything unusual, but he suggested we meet to discuss our next steps. That evening, we sat in his living room, the disassembled parts of the machine spread out on the floor. "We need to destroy these," James said, his voice firm. "We can't risk anyone else finding them." I agreed. We decided to melt down the metal components and dispose of the rest in different locations. It was the only way to ensure the machine couldn't be rebuilt. As we gathered the pieces, James's phone rang. He answered it, his face growing pale as he listened. After a tense few moments, he hung up and turned to me. "That was Electromystic," he said. "He's been monitoring our experiments. He claims the device wasn't just a teleportation machine. It's a gateway to other dimensions. And he warned that by using it, we might have attracted attention." My heart sank. "What kind of attention?" "Entities," James replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Beings from those dimensions. He says they're drawn to the energy of the machine and that they might already be here." A chill ran down my spine. I had always been a rational person, but the events of the past few weeks had shattered my skepticism. We had to act quickly. The next few days were a frenzy of activity. We melted down the metal parts in James's workshop, the acrid smell of burning metal filling the air. The remaining components were dismantled beyond recognition and disposed of in various dumpsters around the city. By the end of it, there was nothing left of Tesla's device. But the disturbances didn't stop. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror, a shadowy figure standing behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. My heart pounded as I stared at the spot where the figure had been. Was I losing my mind? James reported similar experiences, objects moving on their own, strange noises, fleeting shadows. We both knew that whatever we had awakened was not going away easily. The realization was terrifying. Dismantling the machine hadn't closed the gateway. We had opened a door, and something had come through. Desperation drove us to seek help. We scoured the internet for information on dimensional entities and ways to banish them. Most of what we found was folklore and superstition, but we were willing to try anything. We contacted a local historian who specialized in the occult. He was skeptical at first, but agreed to meet after we shared our story. He listened intently as we recounted our experiences, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "You've tampered with forces beyond our understanding," he said finally. "There are ancient rituals that might help, but they're risky and not guaranteed to work." We had no choice. The disturbances were escalating, and we couldn't live in fear forever. With the historian's guidance, we prepared for the ritual. It involved a series of complex steps, marking protective symbols around our homes, burning specific herbs, and reciting incantations in a language neither of us recognized. The night of the ritual was tense. James and I followed the historian's instructions to the letter, hoping against hope that it would work. As we completed the final incantation, a sense of calm washed over me. The air seemed to clear, the oppressive feeling lifting slightly. For a few days, things seemed to return to normal. The disturbances stopped, and I dared to believe we had succeeded. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. We had glimpsed a hidden world, and once seen, it could never be unseen. As I lay in bed one night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching, waiting. The machine was gone, but the consequences of our actions lingered, a shadow over our lives. We had played with forces we didn't understand, and the echoes of our curiosity would haunt us forever. The calm after the ritual was a fragile one. James and I resumed our daily lives, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety we couldn't ignore. We were constantly on edge, half expecting the disturbances to resume. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, we began to hope that maybe, just maybe, we had closed the door we'd so recklessly opened. One evening, as I was organizing some old papers, I stumbled upon a folder containing Tesla's notes that I had copied earlier. I hesitated, torn between the urge to delve back into the mystery and the desire to let it go. Against my better judgment, I decided to review them one last time. As I read through Tesla's notes, something caught my eye, a reference to a fail-safe mechanism. It was a brief mention, almost as if Tesla had deliberately been vague. The fail-safe was designed to stabilize the machine and close any dimensional rifts it might create. My heart raced. Had we missed an essential part of the blueprint? I called James immediately. He arrived within the hour, and together we pored over the notes. The fail-safe mechanism was indeed mentioned, but the details were sparse. We pieced together what we could, realizing that it was an integral part of the machine we had overlooked. Our dismantling of the device had been thorough, but without the fail-safe, any rift we had opened might still be unstable. We knew what we had to do. We needed to reassemble the machine and activate the fail-safe. The thought of rebuilding the device filled us with dread, but there was no alternative. This time, we were not motivated by curiosity, but by necessity. Gathering the scattered components was a challenge, but we managed. The disassembled pieces from various dumpsters and storage spaces were reunited in James's garage. As we reconstructed the machine, the air seemed to thrum with an ominous energy. It felt like we were undoing a deliberate action, as if the universe itself was reluctant to allow us a second chance. After days of grueling work, the device was complete once more. The fail-safe mechanism was rudimentary, but critical. It involved synchronizing the machine's frequencies to a specific harmonic that Tesla believed would neutralize any dimensional disturbances. With everything in place, we prepared to activate the machine. The atmosphere was tense, each of us acutely aware of the risks. We double-checked every connection, ensuring there were no mistakes. Taking a deep breath, I powered on the device. The familiar hum filled the room, the coils glowing faintly. This time, however, the energy felt different, more controlled, more purposeful. James adjusted the frequencies, and we initiated the fail-safe sequence. The machine emitted a low, resonant tone, vibrating through the air. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the hum intensified, and the room seemed to distort slightly, as if reality itself was being stretched. The fail-safe mechanism kicked in, stabilizing the energy fluctuations. Suddenly, a flash of light filled the room and the hum ceased. The machine powered down, the silence almost deafening. We held our breath, waiting for any sign that the rift had been closed. As the minutes ticked by, the oppressive feeling that had haunted us for weeks began to lift. It was as if a heavy weight had been removed, the air clearing. We looked at each other, a mixture of relief and exhaustion on our faces. In the days that followed, the disturbances ceased completely. There were no more whispers, no shadowy figures, no strange occurrences. It seemed we had finally managed to close the door we had so recklessly opened. James and I agreed to dismantle the machine once more, this time taking extra precautions to ensure it could never be rebuilt. We destroyed the components, melting down the metal and incinerating the notes. The blueprint, the device, and all evidence of our experiments were erased. As life returned to normal, I often reflected on our experience. The thrill of discovery, the fear of the unknown, and the weight of responsibility had all left a lasting impression. We had glimpsed a hidden world, one filled with wonders and dangers beyond our comprehension. In the end, the true legacy of Tesla's hidden invention was not the device itself, but the lesson it taught us. Some secrets are meant to remain hidden, some doors better left unopened. Curiosity may drive us to explore, but wisdom lies in knowing when to stop. The memory of our journey remains, a reminder of the thin veil between our reality and the mysteries that lie beyond. And though the machine is gone, the whispers of our adventure linger, echoing in the silence, a testament to the extraordinary and the unknown.